Making Regalia is made possible in part by Hamilton Beach, makers of quality home and commercial appliances, and by Zcals, providers of custom decals, graphics, and t-shirts, and by generous contributions from viewers like you.
Welcome back to another episode of Making Regalia with me, Juaquin Lone Lodge. Today we're going to actually do a ribbon shirt for a straight dancer, and it's my privilege to bring to you one of the premier straight dancers out there in the world, Sky Wahpepahh. He comes from the Kickapoo tribe here in Oklahoma. You know, he's danced pretty much all his life. He's actually really big in his tribe as he's been called upon by a lot of elders and stuff for ceremonial ways, so he's higher in a hierarchy. He comes from two descendants of two different war chiefs, one Sasquatch and one Chewbacca. And I'm proud to bring you him. This is Sky Wahpepahh. Thank you, brother, for showing up on our show. And
glad to be here.
Let you talk about yourself. Tell the world, you know, like kind of where you come from. So.
Okay, I'm glad to be here today. It's good to say hello to everybody out there, TV Lansing at home, watching on the web. I come from the small town of Jones, Oklahoma. Proud member of the Kickapoo tribe of Oklahoma. And JR is going to make me a ribbon shirt today. I'm going to be his male model, because I'm bringing sexy to the show.
Yeah. So I'll tell you a bit about the straight dance. You know, like Sky, you know, like tell me about, like, you know, what it means to you to dance and stuff as far as the straight dance.
It's my opportunity to get out there and try to keep everything going back to the old style, original ways. Dance like a man, be a warrior dance, tell my story of how I hunt and all that, and take down the enemy.
Yeah. So the originality about the straight dances comes from here in Oklahoma, and you know, I'm proud to say, you know, I've seen this growing up. You know, watched it. You know, it is a style that, you know, if you look at it, it's more the like professional style of dance. The way I look at it is almost like the Native American tuxedo, because these straight dancers are dressed with very elaborate outfits. You know, they look really good. You know, you have your cut beads and you have like your brass work, and the shirts, you know, are kind of essential to it. It's kind of like a really good shirt, you know, kind of puts you out there. And today, you know, I have the pleasure of making this shirt for him. But with this, you know, going through the mechanics actually doing the shirt, I'm going to show you how to get the measurements and do everything that you need to configure it. With these measurements, you can take these measurements along and do shirts for little kids, you know, adolescents, teenagers, and grown men like Sky here. So now we're at the segment where we're going to actually measure our male model here. I got my beautiful model here. We're going to go through and measure, like, I like to go in segments, so I'm going to go from measurements from shoulder to shoulder, the length of the shirt from the top to the bottom, the width over, and from there we're also going to measure the armpit and the length from the top of the shoulder down to the arm. So from here, I'm going to show you how I do that. I'm going to have my beautiful model turn this way, and from here, you know, you can take these measurements, and this is the way you can measure little kids, you can measure, you know, adults. It doesn't matter, it's just the way I do it, and you can get all the perfect measurements that you need so you can customize this shirt. So taking my measuring tape, you know, when you find the 2 points of the shoulder, they're pretty much right here to here. All you got to do is take your measuring tape, measure from here on over, and you're going to go 22. Now that's an exact measurement. 22 inches is like perfect for here, but when we write it down, you always want to give it a little leeway. So actually I'm going to put 23 on there. That gives me a ½ an inch on both sides when I do my sewing to connect my pieces. So from there, I'm just going to write 23. And from the length, I'm going to measure from, I'm not going to measure down here, but I'm going to measure the top of the neck. Because later on, when I actually do cut the material, I'm going to cut this at an angle. So I'm going to cut like right below the neck on down. And since this is a straight dance shirt, what I want to do is I want to give him a little bit of leeway because he does wear a belt, and sometimes when he wears a belt, it does pull the material up. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go about 36 inches. And from there, that's a pretty good length, and that'll give him, like, you know, a couple inches when the material is pulled up by the belt. So 36, and plus we're going to do a little addition for our measurements. So total, I'm going to sew up here and on the bottom. I'm going to go to like 2 inches, so I'm going to 38. 38 in length, and then the width. Now this is what the span around the shirt. Granted, you know, Red Sky is kind of a big boy, so what we're going to do is we're going to see how much measuring tape I actually do have. So if you can, wrap that around you, please. And we're just going to measure around the front and grab this to the side. And okay, he's sucking in, but looks like we've got about 60 inches. I'm going to give a little bit more addition on that, so I'm going to go with, to make it a comfortable shirt for him, I'm going to go probably about 65 inches in width. So
A lot of man.
65 inches. And now what we're going to do is the length of the arm. This is, you know, from the point from the end of the shirt on down to the cuff length. So this is going to include the cuff. Granted, you want to do a little bit of addition of, as far as doing another inch here and another inch here, because you're going to have folds here, folds there. So all I'm going to do is measure here, and right at 22 inches. So addition on that, about 23 inches. We'll just go 23 on that one. And now what we do, when you do the armpit, usually when I do it, I'll do a cut. If you can turn this way, like on the shirt, I like to cut almost like at a slope on this way. And I want to actually make this more comfortable for him. I don't want to measure his arm and make it really tight, because what happens if you do that, you know, the arm isn't really going to have a lot of flexibility. And so I'm just going to measure from here to here. That's about, I would say about 11 inches top to bottom. So we're going to actually multiply that by 2, and that'll be 22 plus our addition of another inch, so it'll be 23 inches for the armpit. Now the cuff is very simple. All you're going to do is just measure around like the wrist. And he's been handcuffed a bunch of times, so we can just go and do this one, I would say about maybe a 10. Give it a little bit of leeway, about 11. So, and now we got all our measurements for, you know, like our shirt. We can do this, and I can either draw this out and put the measurements on it like a diagram, or I can just start going and cutting material like I can. But take it with you that, you know, these are how I get my measurements for my shirts. And using this, you know, like this technique, you can measure little kids, you can measure, you know, grown adults, you know, adolescents, you know, teenagers. But this is kind of how I do my measurements. So hopefully, you know, you can take this with you, and, you know, this helps you out when you actually do your shirts. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the measurements that we got before, and we're going to go and start cutting out material. You know, that's why the first couple ones, I wouldn't say, you know, go and get the most expensive material you can. Maybe just start off, you know, like the bargain bin, and, you know, get maybe like $1 yard material. Now I got my measurements here, and like we said, we already measured them already. And the material that we're going to go with for this ribbon shirt is kind of an older school material. This is just a cotton print, very durable. You know, it's really nice. You know, it's got a really nice, beautiful print to it. So it's going to make a pretty good dress. Let's just go and unroll this real quick. I said, you know, we're just going to correlate our measurements with the material itself. Let's see. All right, now I just need my trusty yardstick, and from here we're going to go with the length first, and I'm going to measure my material and see what I'm working with as far as the length, and that way I can just fold it over if I need to. So now we're at the point where we're going to take the measurements that we got earlier from our male model here, and we're going to transfer it over to this material. Here, this is a pretty good, nice material. The straight dance is kind of like older school, and this print is a beautiful print. You know, it's got like roses and stuff on it, and this is a cotton material. This is, you know, really easy to work with. So even if you do mess up like on this shirt and it doesn't fit right, or you didn't get an arm right, or, you know, whatever might happen, you can always keep this material, and I have bins and bins of this because I've messed up many times. I usually keep this, and I'll use it down the road to make design work, or, you know, actually fill in something. So go ahead and keep this. You don't have to throw it away, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to take my measurements here, and I'm going to take this material, and I'm going to kind of measure it out and see what I'm working with. That way I can actually kind of cut where I want to. You know, we have two sides of this material. You have like the outer side, which has a beautiful print on this side, and then you have the inside. All the markings that we're going to do to make our cuts and stuff, we're going to actually do on the back side. So we're going to just fold this out. I'm going to stretch it out as far as I can, and this way I can just measure up and see how what I'm working with. Fold this out, and I'm going to take my ruler, and if you remember, you know, like the length of the shirt, that's going to be from the top to the bottom. We want about a 38. So all I'm going to do is just measure this out with my yardstick from the bottom to here. Now you'll know sometimes if you look at some materials, it does have a print and it does stop. I usually cut this off, so usually you won't use this in your materials, because sometimes if you do fuse things together, you might have this little line in white and it doesn't really look that good. So I'm just going to measure out, 36, and then from there I'm going to put like another 2 more inches. So I'm going to kind of mark my material with a pencil and just add, well, like I said, we're going to measure 38. From there, and from the width of the shirt, I believe it was, what is it, 65. So we're going to cut that in half. 65 divided by 2 is
32.5.
He's good. He's really good. 32.5. Faster than I thought he was. So
Not just a pretty face.
32.5. And all we're going to do is go here. So 22 and a half. No, is it? Yeah, 22 and a half. I'm going to put a little mark here.
32.
32? Oh, yeah, it's 32. Whoops. So I'm going to pull this down. And if I can, I'm going to fold this in half. So I have 2 congruent sides. Okay, and now we're at the segment we're going to take our measurements that we got earlier and transfer it over to our material. We've already got all this stuff done, so now I'm just going to measure this out and start cutting. For the straight dance outfit, we're going to go with this rose print. This is kind of more traditional kind of material. It's a cotton material. It's real easy to work with. All I got to do is cut here. It doesn't stretch, which is a good thing. Realistically, personally, I don't really like working with materials that stretch too much because it's kind of a pain. Plus, they kind of gunk up in the sewing machine. So what we're going to do, we first measured like the width of the shirt at, I believe it was like 64 or so. So we're going to cut that in half, and I'm just going to go ahead. And what I've done is actually I've already put this material out so I can see what I'm working with as far as the length here and our other length. So I folded this over, and the cool part about this trick is once I cut here, I'm going to have both panels of the shirt. I'm going to have the back and the front. But we're going to go with this size, and we're going to make it a little bit bigger because he does dance in it, and he wants it to breathe really well, and he wants movement. So I'm going to give it a little bit of leeway there and make it a little bit comfortable for him so he can wear it. So I've already measured this out, and if you look, I'm right at 32 inches, which is a big shirt, but it'll come out to be 64 in diameter. Plus, minus, my infusing when I actually do so, it'll take off about an inch here, inch there. So realistically, we're looking at maybe like 62 when we're totally finished.
Slim 62.
So all I got to do is, just measure up the sides of the front and back, make sure they correlate, and just the same line that's already cut, we're just going to cut here, and then we'll cut on the very end there, and then we have both our panels. From there, we're going to cut at the bottom, and that'll be the bottom of the shirt. And then from there, we're going to fold this over, and I'll show you how to do the top of the shirt. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting this. And this does take a little bit of practice. And, once you do get comfortable at it, it's not that bad. It's just, like I said, it just takes time, actually learning how to work with material. And really, really good sharp scissors, it is a plus. I don't like to use any dull scissors because it takes forever and it could fray your material. So, the sharpest scissors you get, the better. Okay, so now we got like one panel done. And you can kind of see like up here at the top, there is like, this is kind of a little white piece. This is where the print stops, and that's where the ink goes, I believe. And we want to cut this off. We don't want to use this because if you ever do sew this together and infuses with the other material, sometimes this might pop out and it's really not going to look that good, like with the little white all of a sudden. So we've already got this up. I'm going to cut the other side so we'll have both panels together. Ooh, like a ninja. There we go. Cut this side. Me and Red, Red Sky, we've traveled a lot of places, and when we first started traveling together, he kind of needed some help with his outfits and stuff. So, we had to go to fabric stores, and one of the craziest stories I have is I went over there and I picked out my material and I brought it to the front counter. And you usually got to tell them, how many yards you're going to make and how much you need. And this little woman came up to the counter and she was like, how many yards do you need? And I was like, I need 4. She was like, well, what are you making? And I was like, I'm making a shirt. And she's like, that's a big shirt. So
Well, I'm a big guy. What can I say?
so that's kind of how that comes about. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to fold this material over. You can have 4 pieces, you know, like kind of in a way. It's both panels together. This way you can cut here, and knock out a bunch of steps all in one. So we got this done. And now we're going to go with the length of the shirt. We went with the width first. Now we're going to go the length from the top to the bottom. That's where we measure from the bottom of the shirt to the top of the neck. And I believe from our measurements, we went 38th in length. So all I'm going to do is take my measurement from there and mark here, add 2 more inches right there and there. Now, you know, granted, you know, I should measure like both sides. I'm going to kind of cheat and use this yardstick. This one is 31. So I'm going to go and eyeball this, and this is kind of, sometimes I do this a lot, and it's only because I kind of feel comfortable with it, but I'm just going to cut a straight line. And I know that might scare a lot of you guys, but you know, kind of used to working with material, and you'll get used to working with it too. So there, now we got our length of our shirt, and I'm going to trash this because it has that little marking on it, and I'm going to go and correlate the top of the shirt. And usually when you do the top of the shirts, there's kind of a bow to like everyone's shoulder. So you don't want to cut straight across because it looks like the shirt will look like almost like a bag, like he's wearing like, you know, like a grocery bag, and you don't want to do that. So we want to give it a little form fit, and you know, for the shoulder, it's kind of a rounded part. So I'm just going to go straight across up here. And usually what I do is I just measure like 3 inches down, and I kind of eyeball it straight to that point. That's all I'm going to go for. So okay, they don't make these for left-handers, I swear. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut there. And that's kind of, I don't really have to mark it with my pencil. I'm just going to go ahead and cut and aim for the center point. Now, see, when you do this, since I've got both panels folded over and I'm cutting through 4 pieces of material, I'm actually making every one of them perfect, like exactly like the other. And now we're going to go and pull this over. And you see it's perfectly placed, so like all of them are actually corresponding perfectly together. And what we've done is we're going to measure like the armpit. And from what we got for the armpit, and we wanted to make it comfortable, I believe we went, let's see, armpit, I believe it was 11 inches down. So from top here to about here, I'm going to cut with my scissors right there. Now see, you have your little tab. And what I want to do is I want to make this a half moon right here, and that way the sleeve will go perfectly. Now when you cut the sleeve, since we went 11 here, we're going to correlate that with a 22. So the length of that armpit is going to be 22. Add another inch to it for our infusion, so together it'll be 23 inches. So it'll go all the way around perfectly, and then we'll still have the other inch to infuse everything together. So I'm going to go here. Cut my half moon. This guy knows all about moons.
He says half moon. He's probably on full moon.
So we're gonna cut this. So now we got our half moon cut, and if I leave it like that, you know, he's gonna look like Rambo. But we're gonna go and continue on with this. And like I said, all I'm gonna do here when we get to the sewing part is I'm just gonna fuse these together. I'm not gonna sew here because this is our armpit, and then I'm gonna sew here, and then we're gonna cut our neckline. So I believe our neckline from here, this guy's kind of got like a corresponding neck, so I'm going to kind of even this out. I'm going to go start off with a 7, and from there I kind of go and see how it fits. But I want to get a good like neckline, so I'm going to go 7 here, and I'm just going to round up.
So you're cutting at an angle?
Mm-hmm. Just like so. So we got our neckline, and our shirt is actually ready to be sewn. All I got to do is flip this over, Not going to sew here, but from there, like the base of the shirt is done. So I'm going to wait till later to sew this up. go ahead and start cutting out our sleeve so we'll have everything together. So when we do get ready, everything's there, ready to go. Let's go ahead and start doing the sleeve. So now we're going to go and cut our sleeves out, and we're going to do the same trick that we did before. As I'm going to go with my measurements and I'm going to fold the material together and over each other. That way when I do cut this one sleeve out, I'm actually cutting two sleeves out. So what the measurements that we do have is from the armpit around was 11 inches. Oh, 11 inches also multiplied by 2, 22. Plus, we're going to go with our seam allowance of another inch, so that's going to be 23 inches total. So when we infuse, everything's going to come together perfectly. So hopefully. So all I'm going to do is take my material over, fold it over, kind of put it both together, and you see I'm just kind of balancing this out. I'm going to kind of fold it here, fold it there, take my measuring stick, and 23 inches. If you can see, I got it perfectly at 23. I got a little bit of extra material to work with. I'm just going to cut that off. But if you see, perfectly 23. And now what we're going to do is the length of the arm there, which we measured out is going to be 26. So pretty much all we're going to do is we're going to cut a big giant square. And I'm going to go ahead and do this eyeballing. Bam, there we go. Now we got a little bit of excess here, so I'm going to cut this off so everything correlates perfectly. I said this was 23 on down. You know, we're not going to leave like the sleeve all totally that the width, because you're going to come out with a crazy looking giant bottom sleeve. And so I'm going to cut and make it a little bit narrower, so that way, you know, it comes in like gets a little bit more form-fitting, because you know you don't want big giant trunks under your sleeve, you know, like hiding pigeons or something like that. So we're going to cut that out real quick. So
we look like a Confucius sleeve.
Yeah, right. So I'll cut the other side of the material. That way we got two panels. All I'm doing now is just kind of holding the material down so it doesn't move that well, and you know I can get a really good cut. And so knowing that this is going to be the armpit and this is the very end of the cuff, what we're going to do is we're going to just take this again, fold it down, and make it match perfectly with the other one. And like I said, we're not going to do that circus cut, you know, like hiding pigeon under the sleeve. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to cut an angle right here, and that way it'll give it a little bit more form-fitting. I'm going to go with maybe, let's see, take 3 inches off. And we're just going to see how that looks. And I've already made cuffs for this. And I'm going to show you how to do that, because, you know, like at the very cuff right here, what we're going to do is we're going to take the iron and iron this over, and iron this over. So when the sleeve actually connects to the cuff, it'll have a little bit of bunchiness, and then it's going to correlate perfectly into it. Almost pretty much like the dress shirts that you buy at Express, or, I don't know, like Versace, I guess you could say. So I'm just going to cut this at an angle. And I'm going to aim for the point out here. And get as close as I can without until it runs out. There. Now you don't want to go all the way up here, and then, you know, because that'll mess up your measurements if you do go way cutting up here. You just want to kind of get a little natural like groove right there, and pretty much this sleeve is done. So now we're coming to another point of our actual project. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fuse these together. What you want to do is you want to unfold like the materials that you have, and we're going to sew inside out. So no one's actually going to see these seams when you do this. So all I like to do with these ribbon shirts is, you know, since it's the same panel, I like to go and start from the armpit down. And I'll just go here. I've already put them inside out. If you can see, both prints are back. And all I'm going to do is just take it and fold it over, and then we're going to tack this down. This will give me a good seed because this is actually the material folded over. So from here, just going to fold it, start my sewing machine, put this together, and we're off. So now we've gone and we've attached both panels of our shirts together, the front and the back. You know, all we did was just fold it over, straight stitch all the way up, did the shoulders and did the waist. From here on out, this is a little bit of the tricky part. We're gonna do the sleeve. And you know, this is where I say, you know, like it's kind of good to use like the kind of like less expensive material. I don't want to say cheap, but we'll just go with less expensive. But the way I do it is you're going to actually have to attach it with both of the good print on together. That way when it starts to spread apart, you know, both pieces are together. So the way I do it is just fold it together. And I'm going to turn this inside out again real fast. From here, fold this inside out. From there, and we're going to do, since we went 23 inches and this is 11 inches, this will give us a pretty good idea of how we're going to do this. Right there, you're going to just take this inside the material here, place it here, and we're going to tack it all the way around. The seam allowance will actually come together, and we should have a little bit left over to us for just to fold here and make the perfect seam all the way up. So that's all we have to do. If I could show you one more time, because this is kind of tricky, you're going to fold this out, and we're going to attach this just like so, and we're going to go all the way around. Okay, so now we'll come to the tricky part to actually attaching the sleeve on. Don't be afraid, this is pretty easy. All we've got to do is we're going to attach the good print side, and we're going to fold this over, and then we're going to take this inside here, and we're going to fold this over and attach it together. That way when you pull it apart, you know, at least like both good sides are touching. So you're going to take it like this, touch it together there, and from there we're going to seam it right there all the way around, and our seam allowance should give us like a little bit of leeway that from here down, all we got to do is fold it over and seam straight on up the sleeve. So that's all you got to do, and it takes a little bit of time to understand that, but that's all you have to do. From there, fold this over, where both pieces of good material actually touching, and that's your sleeve. I want to thank some people out there for watching us all over the powwow world. Lillian Lane, Tin from El Reno, Oklahoma, says she watches the show all the time. She's an inspiring artist, and just want to let her know, just keep up the good work out there. Red Sky, you want to give any shout outs out there to all the people out there?
I just want to say hi to everybody out there at Turtle Island. Guys, keep it up, keep going, and catch the show out. It's a pretty good show. I like it. Hopefully I'll be back again, visit with you guys soon enough.
So thanks again to all the family and friends for tuning in and watching Making Regalia with me, Juaquin Lone Lodge, and Red Sky Wahpepahh. Aho to all the people out there.